Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and many speakers who have left, thank you very much. There's almost as many of you here on the podium and on the stage as in the audience. And to those of you who've managed to plough through, thank you very much for staying for this final session. So we've come to the end of what I'm sure we all agree here in this room has been an extremely informative event. And before opening up the floor to the speakers and your questions as well, I'd just like to take a few moments to summarize and contextualize the exciting energy crossroads at which Lebanon finds itself today. Now, as you've heard throughout the course of the day, depending on their size and commercial viability, Lebanon's potential energy deposits could, of course, have a huge transformative effect on this country's economy. But, of course, the choices that this country makes about how it wants to go about exploiting them and financing some of those choices, as you just heard from the last panel, will have long-lasting effects for generations to come, which is why it's so important to get these things right now, and above all, to manage expectations as well. It's been very encouraging earlier on in the day to hear from various members of the government of Lebanon about how this country is now passing legislation that's required to get prospecting going sooner rather than later. And it's also been very encouraging to hear from members of the private sector in the form of people like Total that was present here earlier today, that despite the cost pressures that the fall in the oil price and gas price has brought over the last 5 years, exploration, it seems, is not dead in the water, not even offshore, if you get the pun. Since we're here to talk about the roadmap towards Lebanon's future oil and gas wealth, I want to pose the question, where does that lead? As you heard Dr. Ressel mentioning earlier, what is this country's vision for tapping this oil and gas when eventually it is tapped? How big are Lebanon's oil and gas deposits? Who could be the best partner to help this country develop them? And who is the ultimate customer? Could it be the domestic market? Yes. But could it also be somebody further afield as well? We heard from the former Qatari energy minister earlier on today about the opportunities of developing other sectors linked to the oil and gas sector from here for Lebanon. And last but not least, when and if that gas is tapped, what's the best distribution mechanism for it? Should Lebanon be partnering up with other neighboring countries like, for instance, Egypt and Cyprus to try and pipe that gas through if LNG terminals aren't necessarily economically viable? So those are just some of my questions. Many of you in the audience have also been asking yourselves the same things. But I want to open up the floor to your questions for our panel of esteemed guests. So the usual house rules apply. Please say who you are and lift your hand. Thanks.
Thank you. Magdi Nasrallah from Venetia University. I'm originally from the American University in Cairo, director of the Petroleum Engineering Program, and I'm here to develop a program in petroleum engineering for Venetia University. I listened to all these talks. I have a few comments and a few concerns. Coming from Egypt, I know what is really going on in the oil and gas sector. Zohr is undoubtedly a great discovery, and it really opens new venues for the entire region. And it gets us off the hook with some problems with Israel that were mentioned earlier today. Having said that, we developed Zohr in 3 years. Indeed, we have the infrastructure, but from the day of exploration to production, which will take place within the next 3 to 4 months, it's 3 years. Why do you think you have to wait 7 years to develop your reservoirs while you have all the geological studies already made?